I stared at the encrypted phone in my trembling hands as the countdown hit 0. And in that moment, sitting in the back of my rusted Jeep with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes to my name, I realized my father hadn't abandoned me at all. He had been preparing me for war. The screen flashed to life, scanning my retina, and his voice filled the cramped space. Deep, clear, unmistakable, my father speaking to me from beyond the grave. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. All I could do was listen as he told me that everything I thought I knew about my inheritance, about my family, about myself, was a carefully constructed lie. And I had exactly 72 hours to save an empire I never knew existed. But before I tell you how I went from sleeping in my car to bringing my own sisters to their knees, before I show you how I dismantled the people who threw me away like trash, I need you to do something for me. If you're enjoying the story of how the forgotten daughter became the queen, hit that like button. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. And comment below if you've ever been underestimated by your own family. Trust me, this gets so much better. Now let me take you back to where it all began, to the day I learned that being loved and being valued are two very different things. I grew up in a penthouse on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, but I might as well have been invisible. My name is Clara Sterling, and for 18 years I was the girl who didn't quite fit into her own family's story. Victoria. My oldest sister was the financial prodigy. By 25, she was already managing portfolios worth millions, speaking at investment conferences, making our father beam with pride at every quarterly report. Serafina, just 2 years older than me, was the social media darling, the influencer, with 3 million followers, who turned everything she touched into digital gold. Her Instagram posts about our family's lifestyle got featured in Vogue, Forbes, and every major publication that mattered. And then there was me, Clara, the quiet one. The one who preferred books to balance sheets, who got anxious at parties, who asked too many questions about where our money came from and what it was really for. My father, Richard Sterling, owner of Sterling Logistics, a shipping and transportation empire worth $50 million, would pat my head absently at dinner and say I had a good heart. It never occurred to me until much later that he never said I had a good mind. I spent my childhood trying to earn a fraction of the attention he gave my sisters. I studied hard, graduated top of my class, learned 3 languages, thinking maybe that would impress him. I volunteered at soup kitchens and homeless shelters, organized charity drives at school, hoping he'd notice that I cared about more than profit margins and Instagram likes. He'd smile, call me his little humanitarian, and then turn back to discussing market trends with Victoria, or reviewing Serafina's latest brand partnership. I told myself it was enough. I told myself he loved me in his own way. I told myself that love didn't always look the same for everyone. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. My mother died when I was 7, and after that, it felt like the 3 of them formed a unit that I was perpetually outside of. They spoke the same language of ambition and image and success that I couldn't quite grasp. I remember one dinner when I was 15. I tried to tell them about a documentary I'd watched, about supply chain ethics, about how some major corporations were exploiting workers in developing countries. Victoria rolled her eyes and said, business wasn't about feelings, it was about results. Serafina didn't even look up from her phone. My father said, that's nice, sweetheart, and asked Victoria about a merger he was considering. I learned to make myself smaller after that. I learned to eat my dinners in silence, to nod and smile, to fade into the background of their important conversations. I learned that the price of staying at the table was accepting that I would never really have a seat at it. When my father was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 6 months before my 18th birthday, I thought maybe things would change. I took a gap year before college to help care for him. I was the one who drove him to chemotherapy appointments when Victoria was too busy closing deals. I was the one who sat with him through the long, painful nights when Serafina was at influencer events. She claimed she couldn't cancel. I read to him, managed his medications, held his hand when the pain got too bad. I thought we were finally connecting. I thought he finally saw me. He died 3 weeks before my 18th birthday. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. Victoria cried elegantly at the funeral, her mascara somehow never running. Serafina posted a tasteful black and white photo with a caption about legacy and strength that got 40,000 likes. I couldn't even look at social media for days. The will reading was scheduled for the day after my birthday. I didn't expect much, but I also didn't expect what actually happened. Victoria insisted we meet at a law office in the financial district, all steel and glass, and cold fluorescent lighting, the kind of place that made you feel small before anyone even spoke to you. We sat across from the lawyer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses named Mr. Hendricks, who kept clearing his throat uncomfortably. Victoria wore a black designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Serafina was already on her phone, probably lining up the perfect post-announcement shot. I wore a simple black dress I'd bought on sale 2 years ago. Mr. Hendricks opened the leather portfolio and began reading. His voice was monotone, mechanical, as if he'd done this 1,000 times before, and our grief was just another line item on his schedule. To my daughter, Victoria Sterling, I leave controlling interest in Sterling Logistics, including all assets, real estate holdings, and stock portfolios, valued at approximately $28 million. Victoria's face remained composed, but I saw the slight upturn of her lips, the satisfied gleam in her eyes. To my daughter, Serafina Sterling, I leave all remaining company shares, the penthouse residence, and access to the family trust, valued at approximately $22 million. Serafina actually grinned, took out her phone, and snapped a photo of the document Mr. Hendricks was holding. I could already imagine the post. New chapter, grateful, blessed. More hashtags than genuine emotion. Mr. Hendricks paused. He looked at me, and for just a moment, I thought I saw something like pity in his expression. And to my youngest daughter, Clara Sterling, I leave the following personal item. 1 encrypted mobile phone code name, Oracle. It will be delivered to her on her 18th birthday. The room went completely silent except for Serafina's laugh. It started as a snort and then erupted into full mocking laughter. She actually doubled over. Oracle, Dad thought you were some kind of prophet. Oh my God, Clara, he literally left you a phone. Not even a new phone, probably. Just some old encrypted thing he used for boring conference calls. She wiped tears from her eyes, still giggling. I think this is his way of telling you to get a job and figure out your own life. Victoria didn't laugh. She just looked at me with those cold, calculating eyes. Then she turned to Mr. Hendricks. We need to begin the transfer procedures immediately. We have a shareholder meeting on Monday, and I want everything in order. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, and walked out without another word to me, as if I wasn't even in the room, as if I'd already ceased to exist the moment the will was read. I sat there stunned, trying to process what had just happened. $50 million split between 2 sisters, and I got a phone. A phone that apparently was so important it needed a code name, but still, just a phone. Mr. Hendricks handed me a small package wrapped in brown paper. His hand shook slightly. He leaned in and whispered, Your father was a complicated man, Miss Sterling. I'd suggest you keep that phone safe. Then he packed up his briefcase and left. I walked out of that office building into the gray New York afternoon, feeling like I was moving through water. Everything seemed distant, unreal. I took the subway home because I couldn't afford a cab, clutching the package to my chest like it was the only solid thing in a world that had just tilted sideways. When I got back to the penthouse, I found my room stripped. All my furniture was gone. My clothes were thrown into garbage bags in the hallway. Serafina was in what used to be my space, measuring the walls with a tape measure on the phone with an interior decorator. She saw me and shrugged. We're renovating. Victoria's orders. This is going to be my new glam room for content creation, you understand. I didn't understand. I couldn't speak. Victoria appeared from her office, 2 security guards behind her. She handed me an envelope. This is $2,000 and the keys to Dad's old Jeep. It's in the parking garage. You have until tonight to clear out. The penthouse is part of the estate, which means it's mine now, and I'm not running a charity house. You're 18, you're an adult. Figure it out. I tried to argue. I tried to explain that I had nowhere to go, that I'd taken care of our father while they were busy building their careers, that I deserved something, anything. Victoria cut me off. You deserved what you were given, Clara. A phone. Dad's last joke, apparently. Now please leave before I have security escort you out. Serafina walked over, grabbed one of the garbage bags, and tossed it at my feet. Consider this charity, little sister. I put some of your old stuff in there. She smiled that influencer smile she'd perfected for cameras. Good luck out there. I spent that first night in the Jeep parked in a lot near Central Park. I couldn't cry. I was beyond crying. I just sat there in the driver's seat staring at the wrapped package, and I wondered what I'd done to deserve this, what cosmic mistake I'd made to be born into a family that saw me as disposable. The city lights blurred through the windshield, and I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my entire life. The next morning, I unwrapped the phone. It was sleek black with a screen that showed nothing but a countdown timer. 47 hours, 32 minutes, 18 seconds. Counting down to what I tried every password I could think of. My birthday, my mother's name, my father's birthday, the combination to his safe, the address of our first house. Nothing worked. The timer just kept counting down, indifferent to my desperation. I needed money, so I got a job at a diner in Hell's Kitchen called Rosie's. It was the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the Reagan administration. The owner, a woman named Martha with gray hair and kind eyes, hired me on the spot when I told her I needed work immediately. No questions asked. She paid me in cash at the end of each shift. I worked double, slept in the Jeep, showered at a gym I'd kept a membership to from high school. I tried calling old family friends, people who'd been at every holiday dinner, every birthday party. They either didn't answer or gave me polite excuses about being too busy to help. Later, I found out Victoria and Serafina had called them first, spinning some story about me being unstable, going through a rebellious phase, that helping me would only enable my bad decisions. They'd systematically cut off every possible lifeline before I even knew I needed one. I watched that countdown obsessively. Every spare moment between diner shifts, I'd pull out the phone and stare at it. 30 hours, 20 hours, 10 hours. I was convinced it would unlock to some message telling me this was all a test that my father had left me. Something, after all, that I wasn't as worthless as my sisters made me feel. Meanwhile, across town, Victoria and Serafina were busy destroying everything our father had actually built. I didn't know it then, but I'd learned later that they'd brought in a consultant named Marcus Thorne within days of taking over Sterling Logistics. Marcus was smooth, charming, late 40s with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He came highly recommended from some executive placement firm. In the sleek conference room with views of the Manhattan skyline, Marcus presented his restructuring plan to my sisters. He had charts, graphs, projections. These outer borough warehouses and secondary shipping routes are dragging down your profit margins. They're inefficient, old school, barely breaking even. I have a buyer lined up, a logistics conglomerate willing to pay premium rates for immediate acquisition. You could see a 30% increase in quarterly profits within 6 months. Victoria, who only understood numbers and never bothered to ask what those numbers actually represented, nodded along. Her eyes lit up at 30%. Serafina was planning her celebration party, already thinking about the announcement post. New leadership, bold moves, building on a legacy. She could see the engagement metrics climbing. Neither of them bothered to ask why someone would pay premium rates for supposedly inefficient warehouses. Neither of them wondered why Marcus was so eager to sell off parts of a company he'd just started consulting for. They were too busy enjoying their power, too convinced of their own brilliance, too certain that their father's success was just luck and connections that they could easily replicate. They signed the preliminary agreements. Marcus assured them the final paperwork would be ready within the week. They toasted with champagne in that conference room, congratulating themselves on their business acumen. I knew none of this. I was wiping down tables at Rosie's, counting my tips, trying to figure out how to afford a motel room for a week. My entire world had shrunk to survival mode. Get through the shift, find somewhere safe to sleep. Don't think about how badly it hurts. Don't think about what you lost. Just keep moving. 3 days after I started at the diner, an old man came in during my evening shift. He was probably in his 60s with weathered brown skin and calloused hands that spoke of decades of physical labor. He wore a faded jacket with a Sterling Logistics patch on the shoulder. He sat at the counter, ordered coffee and a burger, and watched me work with an expression I couldn't quite read. When I brought him his food, he said my name. Clara Sterling. I froze. I hadn't used my last name when I got hired. I'd just told Martha my first name, too afraid Victoria would somehow find out where I was and make my life even harder. The man's eyes were kind. I'm Leo Chen. I've worked for your father for 32 years. Started as a loading dock worker, worked my way up to warehouse supervisor. He gestured to the empty stool next to him. Sit. You look like you need a break. Martha caught my eye and nodded. I sat. Leo pushed the burger toward me. When's the last time you ate something that wasn't leftover fries? I couldn't answer. My throat felt tight. He sighed. Your father was a complicated man, but he cared about his people. All his people. He talked about you more than you probably know. I wanted to argue to tell him that couldn't be true, that if my father cared, he wouldn't have left me with nothing. But Leo continued. He used to say diamonds are made under pressure. He'd tell me about how you were different from your sisters. Softer, he said, but not weaker, kinder. He worried about you in this world, worried that kindness would be mistaken for weakness. Leo pulled an envelope from his jacket and set it on the counter. This is $3,000. It's from me and some of the other warehouse guys. We know what your sisters did. And we know that's not what your father wanted. I stared at the envelope, then at Leo. I couldn't take it. I couldn't take charity, but Leo pushed it firmly toward me. It's not charity, it's an investment. Your father once told me that you were the only one he could truly trust. I didn't understand what he meant then, but I think I'm starting to. He stood up, left a $20 bill for a $10 meal, and headed toward the door. Then he turned back. When that phone unlocks, Clara, don't waste the gift. And don't give up. You're stronger than you know. He left before I could ask him what he meant about the phone. How did he know about the phone? But the countdown was still ticking. 18 hours, 14 hours, 8 hours. I couldn't sleep that last night. I sat in the Jeep parked in an empty lot near the waterfront watching the minutes tick down. 5 hours, 3 hours, 1 hour. At 11:45 p.m. on my 18th birthday, I stared at that screen like it held all the answers to every question I'd ever had. At exactly midnight, the timer hit 0. But instead of a bell or an alarm, the phone's screen shifted to a retinal scanner. A soft blue light swept across my eyes. There was a beep, and then the screen went black for what felt like an eternity. Then his voice filled the car. My father's voice so clear and present that for a moment I forgot he was gone. Clara, if you're hearing this, it means you didn't give up. That was your first test. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth while I was alive. I'm sorry I let you feel invisible, but everything I did, every choice I made was to prepare you for this moment. Your sisters got the company, you got the truth. And the truth, my darling girl, is worth infinitely more. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. The screen lit up showing coordinates to an address in Brooklyn, followed by lines of code I didn't understand. Then another message appeared in my father's handwriting. The real Sterling legacy isn't money, it's purpose. Sterling Logistics was always just the cover. What I actually built is something far more important. Something your sisters can never be trusted with. Something that only you can protect now. More text scrolled across the screen. Hostile takeover imminent. Core assets being liquidated by an insider named Marcus Thorne. This is not a drill. Activate Protocol Aegis. You have 72 hours before everything I built is destroyed. The coordinates are to a facility called the Sanctuary. Leo will meet you there. Trust him. Trust yourself. I'm sorry I'm not there to help you, but you're ready. You've always been ready. The message ended with one more line. They took everything from you, so you'd have nothing left to lose. Now go take back what's really mine, what's really ours. I sat there in stunned silence, reading and rereading those words. My father had planned this. All of it. The uneven inheritance. The phone. The countdown. He'd known Victoria and Serafina would push me out. He'd counted on it, because only someone with nothing could risk everything. I drove to Brooklyn as the sun was rising, following the GPS coordinates to an industrial area near the Navy Yard. Abandoned warehouses lined empty streets. It looked like the kind of place you'd go to get murdered in a crime procedural. But at the address, there was Leo standing next to a rusted metal door with a Sterling Logistics sign so faded you could barely read it. He nodded when he saw me. He didn't seem surprised. Your dad said you'd figure it out. He unlocked the door and led me inside. The warehouse looked exactly like what you'd expect. Concrete floors, exposed beams, old shipping containers stacked along the walls. But Leo walked to what looked like a solid wall, pressed a sequence of bricks, and the wall slid open to reveal a freight elevator. We descended, and descended, and descended. I lost count of how many floors down we went. When the doors finally opened, I stepped into something out of a science fiction movie. The Sanctuary was a massive underground facility, easily the size of a football field. Banks of computer monitors covered one entire wall, displaying real-time data streams, maps, satellite imagery. People in business casual attire worked at sleek workstations. The technology was cutting edge. Everything was clean, organized, humming with quiet efficiency. This wasn't some dusty storage space. This was a command center. Leo led me to a conference room where the largest monitor flickered to life. A woman appeared on screen, probably in her 40s, with sharp features and piercing green eyes. She had an accent I couldn't quite place. Eastern European, maybe. She smiled at me, but it wasn't warm. It was the smile of someone assessing whether you were an asset or a liability. Welcome, Miss Sterling. My name is Anya Petrova. I'm the operational director of Aegis. We've been waiting for you. I must have looked completely lost because she laughed not unkindly. Let me explain what your father really built. Sterling Logistics. The company your sisters just inherited is legitimate. It moves commercial goods, operates on normal shipping routes, pays its taxes. But it's also the perfect cover for what we actually do. Aegis is a humanitarian logistics network. We transport medicine to war zones where aid organizations can't operate. We move food to regions where governments have collapsed. We provide supplies to refugee camps, disaster areas, places where the official channels have failed or don't exist. We work in shadows because the work itself can't be done in daylight. She pulled up a world map, covered in glowing lines, nodes, connection points. These are our routes. These are our facilities. We operate in 43 countries. Last year alone, we delivered over $50 million worth of medical supplies, food, clean water systems, and emergency equipment to people who would have died without it. Your father created this network over 20 years. He used Sterling Logistics' legitimate operations to mask our actual mission. I tried to process this. My father, the man I thought only cared about profit margins and quarterly reports, had been running a secret global humanitarian operation. It didn't make sense. Why hide it? Why not just do it openly? Anya answered my unspoken question. Because nations don't like it when private citizens operate independent aid networks. Because if certain governments knew we were supplying their enemies or opposition groups, they'd shut us down or worse. Because your father understood that sometimes doing good requires working outside the system. We're not vigilantes. We have legal cover shell companies, everything structured to be as legitimate as possible. But we exist in gray areas, and that requires absolute secrecy. She pulled up financial records. The accounts hidden from your sisters show $850 million in operational funds. Money we've accumulated, invested, and used to fund our missions. But money is useless without infrastructure. And that's where we have a catastrophic problem. The screen shifted to show documents with Marcus Thorne's signature. Your sisters, in their infinite wisdom, hired a consultant who is actually an operative for the Kozlov Group, a Russian logistics conglomerate with ties to organized crime and weapons trafficking. Marcus has convinced them to sell off 15 of our key facilities and 8 major shipping routes. If those sales go through, which they're scheduled to do in 72 hours, our entire network collapses. Thousands of people depending on us for survival lose their lifeline. And the Kozlov Group gets control of routes they can use for trafficking operations. I felt sick. My sisters thought they were making smart business moves, and they were actually handing over my father's life's work to criminals. Anya leaned forward on the screen. Your father structured everything so that at midnight on your 18th birthday, you inherited controlling interest in the real company, not Sterling Logistics. Aegis. 55% of shares and accounts held by Swiss partners who answer only to the codes on that phone. Your sisters got the cover story. You got the actual power, but only if you choose to use it. Leo spoke up behind me. Your dad knew Victoria would only see dollar signs. He knew Serafina would only see fame. But you, Clara, you're the one who volunteered at shelters. You're the one who asked questions about ethics. You're the one who has a conscience. That's why he chose you. I looked at the maps, the data, the faces of people in those photographs on the screen. Children in refugee camps, doctors in field hospitals, families in disaster zones. All of them depending on a system that was about to be destroyed because my sisters were too greedy and stupid to see they were being played. Something shifted inside me in that moment. For 18 years, I'd felt like the extra daughter, the one who didn't matter. But my father hadn't thought I didn't matter. He thought I was the only one who could be trusted with what actually mattered. Not profit, purpose. I looked at Anya. What do I need to do? She smiled, and this time it was genuine. First, we need to stop that sale. Second, we need to remove Marcus Thorne permanently. Third, we need to restructure Sterling Logistics so your sisters can't make decisions this catastrophically stupid again. She pulled up a legal document. I have lawyers standing by. We have evidence of Marcus's real employers and his plans to use our routes for illegal operations. The FBI would be very interested in this information. But we need to move fast, and we need to move smart. Leo added, your sisters are signing the final paperwork tomorrow at 3 p.m., board meeting at Sterling headquarters. If those documents get executed unwinding, the sale becomes legally complicated and time-consuming. We'd lose weeks we don't have. I thought about Victoria sitting in that conference room so sure of herself. I thought about Serafina probably planning her outfit for the signing ceremony. I thought about how they'd thrown me away like I was nothing. And I realized something. They'd made a critical mistake. They'd assumed I'd stay down. They'd assumed I'd accept being discarded. They'd never considered that the quiet sister might have teeth. Over the next 60 hours, I barely slept. Anya walked me through the entire Aegis operation. I learned about shell companies, encrypted communications, how to read logistics manifests, how we moved money without triggering international banking alerts. I met key personnel via video calls, people in Kenya, Syria, Venezuela, Myanmar, people whose entire operations depended on our network staying intact. A doctor in a war zone who told me our medical shipments were the only thing keeping his hospital running. A woman in a refugee camp who said our food deliveries meant her children didn't go to bed hungry. The weight of it was crushing and clarifying at the same time. This wasn't about revenge. This was about responsibility. My father had built something beautiful disguised as something ordinary, and my sisters were about to destroy it through sheer ignorance and greed. Leo helped me prepare. He brought me a suit, perfectly tailored dark charcoal gray, professional, powerful, nothing like the thrift store dresses I'd been wearing. Anya arranged for her lawyers to fly in from Geneva. They coached me on corporate law, on exactly what to say and when to say it. We compiled evidence on Marcus, financial transfers to Kozlov Group accounts, recorded phone calls where he discussed liquidating the humanitarian aspects of the business, email exchanges about eliminating unprofitable assets. The night before the board meeting, I stood in front of a mirror in the sanctuary, barely recognizing myself. I looked like Victoria, sharp, professional, like someone who belonged in a boardroom. But I didn't feel like her. I felt like myself, just a version I'd never been allowed to become before. At 2:55 p.m., I walked into Sterling Logistics headquarters for the first time since my father died. The building was glass and steel, 40 stories overlooking Manhattan. The lobby had my father's portrait on the wall, looking stern and distinguished. I'd never noticed before how his eyes seemed sad. Security tried to stop me at the elevator. I showed them the documents Anya had prepared. Legal proof of my ownership stake. They hesitated, made phone calls, but ultimately had to let me pass. By the time I reached the 40th floor executive conference room, it was 3:02 p.m. I could hear voices through the heavy wooden doors. Victoria's crisp tones discussing paperwork. Marcus's smooth voice assuring her everything was in order. Serafina laughing at something probably on her phone. I took one deep breath, pushed open the doors, and walked into my future. The room went silent. Victoria was mid-signature pen, hovering over a document. Marcus Thorne sat at the head of the table where my father used to sit, looking comfortable and confident. Serafina was indeed on her phone, probably live streaming. Two men in expensive suits, clearly the Kozlov Group representatives, sat across from them. Papers were spread across the gleaming conference table. Contracts, transfer agreements, the systematic dismantling of everything my father built. Victoria recovered first. Security. She stood up, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Get her out of here. She's trespassing. I walked calmly to the table, Leo and two of Anya's lawyers behind me. I placed a hard drive on the polished wood surface. Nobody moved. I looked directly at Victoria. I'm not trespassing. As of midnight 3 days ago, I own controlling interest in this company. 55% of shares through accounts with Baumann and partners in Zurich. All legally documented, all ironclad. Your security doesn't work for you anymore. They work for me. Victoria's face went white. That's impossible. Dad left you a phone. He left you nothing. I picked up the hard drive, connected it to the conference room's display system. Serafina had stopped recording, her mouth hanging open. Marcus had gone very still, his eyes calculating. He knew what was coming before anyone else did. I pulled up the first document. This is the actual will, not the public one you were shown. This one, filed with Swiss attorneys and executors, shows the real distribution of assets. Sterling Logistics. The company you think you own represents 20% of my father's actual holdings. The real value is in Aegis. I clicked to the next screen, showing the worldwide network. For 20 years, Dad ran a humanitarian logistics operation, moving medicine, food, and supplies to crisis zones around the world. Everything you think you inherited is just the cover story. Everything I inherited is the truth. Victoria tried to speak but couldn't form words. I kept going. You hired Marcus Thorne as a consultant. Let me tell you who Marcus really is. I pulled up financial records, phone transcripts, email exchanges. He's an operative for the Kozlov Group. The facilities you're about to sell, they're critical nodes in a humanitarian supply network. You're not optimizing profit margins. You're handing over my father's life's work to an organization that traffics weapons and drugs. You're not brilliant businesswomen. You're useful idiots. Marcus stood up, tried to head for the door. Leo stepped in front of it, arms crossed. Marcus smiled that slick smile. I think there's been a misunderstanding. If we could just discuss this. There's nothing to discuss. I played an audio recording. Marcus's voice crystal clear, discussing payment from Kozlov, talking about eliminating the humanitarian operations as quickly as possible, laughing about how easy it was to manipulate two spoiled trust fund girls. I paused the recording. The FBI is downstairs in the lobby. They're very interested in talking to you about illegal business practices, conspiracy, and fraud. They have warrants. They have everything we just reviewed here. As if on cue, federal agents entered the conference room. Marcus Thorne's face finally lost that confident expression. He was handcuffed, read his rights, and escorted out. The Kozlov representatives tried to follow but were detained for questioning. The entire plan, weeks of careful manipulation, collapsed in less than 10 minutes. I turned to my sisters. Serafina looked like she might be sick. Victoria just stared at me like I was a stranger. I'm restructuring this company effective immediately. Sterling Logistics will continue normal operations under new management that I'll appoint. Aegis will continue its humanitarian work with proper oversight, and both of you will report directly to me. Victoria found her voice. You can't do this. We'll fight you. We'll contest the will. We'll tie this up in courts for years. You could try, but then I'd have to share all of this with the media. How you almost sold out Dad's humanitarian legacy to criminals. How you threw your own sister out on the street. How you were so blinded by greed, you couldn't see you were being used. I doubt your precious reputations would survive that exposure. I looked at Serafina, who'd gone pale. I think 40,000 followers would have thoughts about it. I pulled out a document prepared by Anya's lawyers. Here's my offer. You both keep your positions, your salaries, your stock value in the legitimate business. But you work for me now. Victoria, you're going to use your financial skills to make Aegis more efficient, more sustainable. You're going to find ways to fund more missions, help more people. Serafina, you're going to use your social media platform to raise awareness about humanitarian crises. Bring attention to people who need help. You're going to use your influence for something that actually matters for once. Victoria's hands were shaking. And if we refuse, then I'll fire you both, tank the stock to force you to sell your shares to me at a loss. And you can explain to your social circles why you're suddenly out of the family business. Your choice. But decide now. I have a shipment of insulin heading to a hospital in Yemen that's waiting on my authorization. People are literally dying while we have this conversation. They looked at each other, the same two sisters who'd thrown me away like garbage 3 days ago, who'd laughed at my inheritance, who'd treated me like I was worth less than the furniture. Victoria slowly sat back down. Serafina put her phone away. I saw something in their eyes I'd never seen before. Fear, but also something else. Maybe respect. Maybe just the beginning of understanding what they'd almost destroyed. The first few weeks were brutal. Victoria and Serafina resented taking orders from me. They tested boundaries, tried to undermine decisions, complained to anyone who'd listen. But I had Leo, I had Anya, and I had teams of people around the world who depended on me. I wasn't doing this for glory. I was doing it because it needed to be done. Gradually, things changed. Victoria spent a week at the sanctuary, seeing the actual operations, understanding the scope of what we did. I watched her face when she video called with that doctor in the war zone, when he thanked her personally for routing emergency supplies that saved 30 children's lives. Something shifted in her. She started asking different questions, not just about profit margins, but about impact, about how many people we could reach with better logistics planning. She came to me one morning, 6 weeks after that board meeting, with a proposal to restructure our investment portfolio to generate 20% more funding for operations without touching the core capital. Her eyes were bright in a way I'd never seen before. She'd found something numbers could be used for besides accumulating wealth. She'd found purpose. Serafina took longer. She was angry at first, forced to post about refugee crises instead of designer handbags. But I sent her to a camp on the Turkish-Syrian border with a photographer from our team. She spent 3 days there. When she came back, she wasn't the same person. She showed me footage she'd shot on her phone. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, who'd walked for weeks with her family to reach safety. Serafina had given the girl a doll from her bag, some promotional item from a brand deal she'd done months ago. The way that child's face lit up like she'd been given the greatest treasure in the world, it broke something open in my sister. Her next post wasn't perfectly curated. It was raw, real. She was crying in some of the photos. Her makeup was smudged. Her designer clothes were dusty. And she wrote about what she'd seen, what she'd learned about privilege and responsibility. She lost 200,000 followers. Brands dropped her. But she gained something more valuable. She gained authenticity. The followers who stayed were the ones who actually cared. And slowly her platform became a powerful voice for people who'd never had one before. 1 year after that board meeting, I stood in the conference room where it had all changed. We'd just finished our quarterly review. Aegis had expanded operations into 6 new countries. We delivered aid to over 2 million people. Sterling Logistics' legitimate business was thriving under competent management. The financial reports showed sustainable growth without compromising our humanitarian mission. Victoria closed her laptop and looked at me across the table. I owe you an apology. Actually, I owe you about 1,000 apologies, but I'll start with one. We treated you like you didn't matter. I treated you like you didn't matter. And you were the only one who ever actually did. Serafina nodded, her eyes wet. I was a horrible person, Clara. I'm still trying not to be that person anymore. Every day. I don't know if you can ever forgive us. I thought about it. Really thought about it. The hurt was still there. The memory of sleeping in my car, of being thrown away, of feeling worthless. That didn't just disappear because they'd changed. But I also thought about that little girl with the doll. About the doctor saving lives with medicine we'd shipped. About my father's voice on that phone telling me I was ready. I don't know if I forgive you yet. Maybe someday, but I do know that Dad didn't just test me with that phone. He tested all of us. You two just didn't realize you were being tested until you'd already failed. But he also gave you a second chance through me. So maybe that's what family is. Not people who never hurt you, but people who try to do better after they realize they have. We weren't close, not the way sisters in movies are close. We didn't have sleepovers and share secrets. But we had something, respect, a shared mission, an understanding that we were all works in progress, trying to be better than we'd been raised to be. 6 months after that, I visited my father's grave for the first time since the funeral. I brought the Oracle phone with me and set it on the headstone. I told him everything, about the board meeting, about Marcus Thorne in federal prison, about Victoria and Serafina slowly becoming people he might have been proud of, about the lives we'd saved. About the network we'd expanded. I told him I understood now why he'd done it the way he did. If he'd left me the obvious inheritance, I would have been just another rich girl with inherited wealth. I wouldn't have known what it felt like to have nothing. I wouldn't have understood what we were really fighting for every time we sent supplies to people who had even less than I'd had in that Jeep. The struggle had been the point. The pain had been the lesson. And the phone had been both a gift and a test I hadn't known I was taking until I'd already passed. Dad, you were a complicated man, kind of a terrible father in a lot of ways. You let me feel invisible for 18 years. You let me believe I wasn't good enough, but you also trusted me with something more important than money. You trusted me with meaning, with purpose, with the chance to matter in a way that actually counts. I hope wherever you are, you can see that I didn't waste it, that I became the diamond you knew I could be, that the pressure didn't break me. It made me. I stood up, brushed the dirt off my knees, and walked back to my car. Not the Jeep anymore. I'd kept it, but now it sat in a garage as a reminder of where I'd come from. What I drove now was practical, efficient good for the long hours I worked. Nothing flashy. That wasn't who I was. My phone buzzed. The Oracle phone, which I still carried everywhere. A new alert. Emergency request from a field hospital in Sudan. They needed blood supplies, IV fluids, antibiotics. A truck had been ambushed and they were running out of everything. I pulled up the logistics network, found 3 alternate routes we could use, authorized the emergency shipment. Within hours, those supplies would be on their way. Lives would be saved because I'd pressed a few buttons on a phone my sisters thought was a joke. I drove back to the office thinking about inheritance, about what we really leave behind when we're gone. My father hadn't left me money or property or shares in a conventional company. He'd left me a choice. I could have been bitter. I could have walked away, let Aegis collapse, let my sisters destroy themselves through their own greed and stupidity. Part of me had wanted to, especially in those first days. But that would have meant all those people we helped would suffer. That doctor in the war zone, that little girl with the doll, the thousands of others whose names I'd never know, but whose lives intersected with ours for just a moment, just long enough for us to make a difference. My father had understood something I was only beginning to grasp. Real power isn't about control or wealth or making people fear you. Real power is about what you do for people who can never pay you back. About building something that matters more than your own ego or comfort or need to be seen. He'd given Victoria and Serafina what they thought they wanted. Money, status, the appearance of success, and it had almost destroyed them and everything he'd built. He'd given me what I needed: struggle, purpose, the chance to discover who I actually was when everything else was stripped away. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if he'd told me the truth while he was alive. If he'd explained about ages prepared me for what was coming. Would I have been ready? Would I have appreciated it? Or would I have needed to lose everything first to understand what really mattered? I think he knew the answer to that. I think he knew me better than I knew myself. The Oracle phone buzzed again. This time it was Victoria, sending me revised budget projections that would allow us to open 2 new distribution centers in East Africa. Her message said simply, "I think Dad would have liked this plan. What do you think?" I smiled and typed back, "I think you're finally asking the right questions." That's what my father's inheritance really was. Not money, not property, not even the humanitarian network, as important as that was. His real gift was forcing all 3 of his daughters to become better than we were, to face ourselves, our flaws, our capacity for both cruelty and compassion. Victoria and Serafina had to confront their greed, their superficiality, their willingness to throw away family for personal gain. I had to confront my passivity, my willingness to accept being treated as less than I was worth, my fear of claiming space in the world. We'd all failed his first test, but he'd built in a second chance, and somehow we'd managed not to waste it. Now, sitting in my office on the 40th floor, I looked out at the Manhattan skyline and thought about that girl sleeping in a Jeep 1 year ago, scared, alone, convinced she was worthless because her family had discarded her. I wished I could go back and tell her what I knew now, that being underestimated is sometimes the greatest gift you can receive, that rock bottom is the strongest foundation you can build on, that the people who throw you away are really just clearing the path for you to become who you were always meant to be. My father didn't leave me nothing. He left me everything. He left me tested, tempered, and ready. He left me free of the burden of unearned wealth and heavy with the responsibility of earned power. He left me knowing exactly who I was because I'd had to figure it out without anyone's help. He left me unbreakable because I'd already been broken and put myself back together. The Oracle phone sits on my desk now next to a photo of my father and me when I was 7, before my mother died, back when things were simpler. Sometimes I pick it up and scroll through the alerts, the requests, the updates from field operations around the world. Each notification represents lives changed, suffering eased, hope delivered to places where hope is a rare commodity. This is what legacy really means. Not buildings with your name on them. Not wealth accumulated and hoarded, but a system that continues to help people long after you're gone. A purpose that outlives your own existence. My father built that, and he trusted me to protect it, expand it, make it better. So here's what I learned from being the daughter who inherited nothing and ended up with everything. Your value isn't determined by how people treat you. It's determined by how you treat yourself and others when you have every reason to give up. Your strength isn't measured by what you're given, but by what you do with what's taken from you. And sometimes the greatest act of love looks like cruelty at first, like being pushed out of the nest so you finally learn you can fly. My sisters and I will never be close in the traditional sense. Too much damage was done, too much pain inflicted. But we're family in a way that actually means something now, united by work that matters more than our individual egos, trying every day to be worthy of a second chance none of us deserved, but all of us received. And on the hard days, when I'm exhausted from 16-hour shifts and endless crisis management, and the weight of knowing that lives depend on my decisions, I think about my father's voice on that phone. "You're ready, you've always been ready." I think about Leo saying diamonds are made under pressure. I think about that countdown timer hitting 0, and my whole world splitting open into something bigger, harder, and infinitely more meaningful than anything I'd imagined. They took everything from me so I'd have nothing left to lose. And because I had nothing to lose, I had everything to fight for. That was the gift. That was the inheritance. That was the point of it all. So to anyone out there who's been underestimated, overlooked, thrown away by people who should have valued you, I want you to hear this. That pain you're feeling right now, that's not the end of your story. That's not even the middle. That's just the pressure creating the diamond. Keep going, keep fighting, keep believing that you're worth more than how they treated you. Because one day you'll look back at rock bottom and realize it was actually the launch pad. My father didn't leave me money. He left me a test of purpose and a chance to become someone who matters. And I took that chance and built something he would have been proud of. Something I'm proud of. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. Because it helps people. Because it turns pain into purpose and inheritance into impact. That's the legacy I'm building now. Not just maintaining what my father created, but expanding it, improving it, making it better. And someday, decades from now, when I'm the one writing a will, I'll remember that the greatest gift you can give someone isn't security. It's the opportunity to discover their own strength, even if that discovery requires them to lose everything first. The game didn't end when my father died. He was right about that. It only really began. And I'm not playing to win anymore. I'm playing to matter. There's a difference. Winning is about defeating someone else. Mattering is about lifting everyone up, including the people who tried to destroy you. So that's my story. From invisible daughter to the woman who inherited an empire built on compassion disguised as commerce. From sleeping in a car to running a global humanitarian network. From being the joke to being the one who had the last laugh, except I'm not laughing. I'm working. I'm building. I'm becoming. And I'm grateful. Grateful for the pain that taught me empathy. Grateful for the loss that taught me resilience. Grateful for the family that threw me away and gave me the freedom to become someone worthy of keeping. Grateful for a father complicated enough to understand that sometimes love looks like letting someone struggle, and wise enough to make sure that struggle had meaning. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to believe in you the most? Have you ever discovered your own strength only after everything was taken away? Drop a comment below and share your story. And if this resonated with you, if you see yourself in any part of this journey, hit that like button and subscribe, because there's so much more to talk about. Stories of resilience, of transformation, of people who refuse to stay down when life knocked them flat. Your inheritance isn't what you're given. It's what you become despite, or maybe because of what's taken away. Remember that. And when you're at your lowest, when you feel like you have nothing, remember that nothing is sometimes exactly what you need to start building everything that matters. Thank you for listening to my story. Now go write your own.